Is my chair lowered? No, I always get used to this chair. I feel like I have a feminine lower face, like right here, like around my lips. Do I have a feminine lower face? I mean, I don't care. Well, I meant to build this on that side, but I for other chunk. But well, not really happy New Year's yet, but New Year is right around the corner. 2022 is finally going to end, and 2023 is going to commence here within a few short hours. This time, it's actually happening. Oh my god, it's happening! Like, you know that meme from The Office? Anyway, so yeah, 23, stuff's gonna change. 23, I'm entering college. Not right away, but, you know, I'm going to begin my career in college within 7 months from now. Which just, wow, I'm growing up. I feel old. However, I'm going to attempt to, you know, continue streaming. That's very likely. It'll probably really change around August. College will only last for nothing about 4 years. And I don't intend on leaving the channel unless I'm like dirt poor and I need to get my stuff together. But I want to do that. 23 is going to be an interesting year because I have so much I want to do in my games before I go to college, and I only have so much to do it. I doubt I'll get everything I want to do done. But I will go down trying to do it. Anyway, thank you for this year. This marks the 3.5-year anniversary of my channel. So if anybody ever views this, I know it sounds really freaking corny, but thank you. I'm literally almost at 200 subs. You guys need to know how important you are within my channel. And I know it does sound a little bit tacky, a little bit corny, but seriously, without you guys, this channel is not the Avid Agency. It's just a rock on the face of the internet that no one will ever love, no one will ever care about, no one will ever visit. But because you guys subscribe, it puts life into this channel. It puts meaning into this channel. And honestly, if anybody ever sees this, thank you. I honestly thank you for all you've done. Am I, like, you know, like, even though, like, sometimes I go through hard times a little bit, and I look at my, you know, channel, and I'm proud of myself. Even though I'm not going to have a career in YouTube, I want to at least, you know, document my life. Document everything that's happened to me. Even if nobody watches it, it does. I want to immortalize everything I do in my games. Immortalize every block I place in mine in this world. Every second of progress in other games and all that fun stuff. But again, I have to say thank you for giving me such a good year. We gained over at least, I don't know, like what, 90 subs? Like 50 to 90 subs? Our biggest record was 5 subs and 10 subs in a day. It doesn't sound like much, but you gotta imagine where I'm standing from. I love that. I mean, sometimes I literally look, I'm like, how in the actual hell do I have 190 people, living, breathing people, sub to me? And then I'm thankful for that. I really am. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you for everything you've given me. I love talking to you. I love it when I'm just going in, I'm alone, and somebody just goes in my chat and starts talking to me. It makes me happy. It makes my day, actually, to know that I'm not talking to a wall. You guys make my day. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. I'm sorry if it sounds cheesy, but seriously, it's better than like saying thanks for the subs, nerds, saying, I just don't want to be that jerk. Gosh. Rappers who went broke in the stupidest ways. Yes, let's see this.
I guess I did too.
Next time, call me before you make a big call like that. You scared me.
I know.
I saw the news. I'm terrified.
Let's go! I don't think I was different from what I was before I went with jail.
Before he could lead a nation.
Oh, what a Chad.
Bankruptcy, 50 Cent was spending $108,000 per month to rent an 18-bedroom mega mansion, while T-Pain's bankruptcy was so brutal that by the end of it, he had to borrow money just to buy Burger King. However, let's begin by talking about DMX, who had to file for bankruptcy on 3 separate
rest in
occasions
peace,
as he couldn't
DMX.
afford child support. You see, DMX had 17 children with 11 different
Dude.
women, and almost every child resulted in some kind of lawsuit or child support requirement. For example, DMX was sued for $1.5 million worth of child support in 2008 after a genetic test confirmed that he was the father of a previously unclaimed baby, which when combined with his declining music career, resulted in his first bankruptcy filing. 4 years later, in 2012, DMX was sued by a different ex-partner for a further $1 million worth of child support, and a year after this lawsuit, he'd file for bankruptcy a second time. His third bankruptcy would occur in 2016, during which it would be discovered that DMX had racked up a further $1.7 million worth of unpaid child and family support, which accompanied $950,000 in bank debt and $1.7 million worth of tax debt. Since he had $0 in his bank account,
Pay your
DMX was
money.
sentenced to 6 months in prison for the child support, a further year in prison for the unpaid taxes, and was also ordered to pay the government $2.29 million in restitution after he was released from his time behind bars. However, DMX never had the chance to pay the amount back in full, as he'd die in April 2021, and despite his extensive family tree, DMX never wrote a will, meaning that his family was still involved in money-related legal battles even after he was dead and buried.
That sucks.
Tiger was certainly better at managing his child support payments, although he definitely had a weakness when it came to luxury spending. After cultivating his career as a successful rapper, Tiger's name entered news headlines after he purchased dollars behind in rental payments on a luxury Malibu.
No.
As a result, Tiger was sued by his landlord, although he'd failed to show up to court as he was on holiday in Turks and Caicos. Yet this situation wasn't the only example of Tiger spending big in one area while being financially behind in another. For example, in 2016, while shopping for a new Bentley, Tiger's Ferrari 458 was repossessed in the parking lot as Tiger hadn't been paying for the loan. Despite this, Tiger would go on to purchase another Mercedes Maybach, as well as a Land Rover, a Rolls-Royce Ghost, and a Rolls-Royce Cullinan, all of which were repossessed for non-payment, while he was seen looking at a brand new Lamborghini. In addition to this, Tiger was sued by a second landlord for $181,000 after once again missing rental payments in 2016, which was followed by a third property-related lawsuit in 2020, where Tiger had racked up over $200,000 in damages and unpaid rent on yet another rental property. It was then revealed that Tiger was being court-ordered to pay for $200,000 worth of unpaid jewelry, which accompanied the accusation by his ex-girlfriend Black China that he'd been missing child support payments. And just to add a cherry on top of the cake, while all of this was going down, Tyga was in $890,000 worth of tax debt to the government. Despite all of this, Tyga is still seen flexing a lavish life on social media, which is a luxury
Nice
unavailable
job.
to rap producer Scott
That's what we're gonna
Storch,
call
who blew through
repo in
$70
progress.
million in less than 3 years.
It catches up to you.
Scott earned this money by producing for some of the biggest names in music, including Kanye West, Dr. Dre, and Jay-Z. Yet Scott Storch's insane net worth began to diminish after he purchased an insane supercar collection.
30 cars, including Bugattis and Ferraris and all that kind of stuff.
At some point, they're not getting the most out of your car. What makes them expensive?
Just in case he wanted to go out.
What makes cars so expensive? Wait, what's going? What makes them so expensive? They offer performance capabilities, driver assist technologies, and they work on the building them. I'll take my Crosstrek. Thank you very much.
Captain was on full-time staff?
Yeah.
In case you want to take the boat out?
Yeah.
And the boat was how many bedrooms?
7,
7-bedroom boat. Worth about how much?
20 million.
20 million.
Scott went on to explain just how much this lifestyle was costing him.
My monthly overhead for my household employees was somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million a month I was spending.
And that if he continued to work, there wouldn't have been any problems, although this isn't what he would do.
It went from me working and delivering to doing drugs and not going to the studio.
I just stopped working, and then I got depressed and jaded.
As mentioned, Scott stopped making music and instead began to get addicted to the nightlife in Miami. And with no money coming in, plus $1 million a month going out, it was only going to be so long before Scott hit zero. By 2009, just 3 years after having a net worth of $70 million, Scott had filed for bankruptcy. 6 years later, Scott would file for bankruptcy a second time, claiming to have a grand total of $3,600 of assets to his name, $100 in cash, $500 in clothing, and a $3,000 watch. Most shocking, his music companies are valued at $0, and in 2014 he made a grand total of only $10,000. Throughout this hardship, Fat Joe was one of the only rappers to keep their friendship with Scott, possibly because Fat Joe went through a similar situation himself. Fat Joe had earned $1.18 million in 2007, $1.28 million in 2008, $265,000 in 2009, and $630,000 in 2010. However, despite having made this $3.3 million in only 4 years, Fat Joe failed to pay taxes on it. He was able to come up with $718,000 and had also done extensive charity work. However, this wasn't enough to satisfy the judge, who sentenced Fat Joe to 4 months in prison. Despite taking personal responsibility for his actions by stating, "There was a lot going on in the years that I didn't file my taxes, but it was my responsibility," less than 4 years later, Fat Joe entered news headlines again after the IRS revealed that he still owed them $1.1 million in taxes.
Oof.
However, this number was absolutely
IRS
nothing
takes
in
everything
comparison
from me,
to Fat
bro.
Joe's friend Lil Kim, who owed almost 4 times more and became, quote, too poor to file for bankruptcy. Lil Kim wasn't nearly as successful as some of the other rappers featured on this list. However, this didn't stop her from purchasing a $2.3 million mansion back in 2002, notably with the help of a mortgage.
Free shipping, free returns, every day.
Throughout the 2000s, Kim's music career slowed dramatically, and by 2018, Kim was filing for bankruptcy, as she still owed the full $2 million on her property, despite the 16 years that had passed. In addition to this, Kim now owed $1.85 million to the government for 13 years worth of unpaid taxes, which accompanied a further $185,000 in unpaid legal fees. The bankruptcy became even worse after discovering that by 2018, Kim was earning a comparatively small $18,000 per month, of which $2,000 went to staff, another $2,000 went to clothing, and $10,000 went to travel fees, meaning she had less than $4,000 per month to dig herself out of $4 million worth of debt. Somehow Lil Kim managed to, quote, get her finances into good shape, and her bankruptcy filing was dismissed. However, MC Hammer wasn't quite so lucky.
MC
Despite
Hammer.
having the 5th best-selling hip-hop album of all time, which sold 17 million copies and featured songs such as You Can't Touch This, MC Hammer wasn't able to stay out of financial trouble. He bought more than 17 luxury cars, a private jet, 2
Dude.
helicopters, and 21 racehorses. Some of the horses were valued at around $1 million.
That's a lot for a horse. By the way, You don't need all those cars, dude. Just have one. If I ever got more cars, I would cap my car count at 3. And the reason is that I actually thought about having 2 or 3 cars. Here's why. If one car breaks down, you may be wondering, well, what will I do if the other one breaks down? Well, guess what? At that point, I'm freaking screwed. But seriously, that's what I'd do. I'd have a backup car.
Expenses, however, were on his home. He bought a property in Fremont, California for $12 million and spent another $30 million on renovations to turn it into his dream home. He added a bowling alley, basketball court, baseball field, recording studio, movie theater, 17-car garage, tennis courts, and 2 swimming
17-car
pools.
garage, damn.
40,000 square foot mansion. One of the pools was shaped like his signature baggy pants that came to be known as hammer pants. He added several marble statues of himself throughout the property and installed a gold hot tub in his bedroom. And to keep everything running smoothly, he employed a staff of nearly 200 people on the property, which cost him an estimated $500,000 a month. Unsurprisingly,
Jesus.
less than 5 years later, MC Hammer had filed for bankruptcy, at which point it would be revealed that he hadn't only spent his entire $70 million fortune, but had also taken on a further $13 million in loans, which had been borrowed from over 200 different lending institutions.
Jesus.
Despite having spent a total of $42 million on his California dream home, the property resold for only $6.5 million. However, if we're on the topic of expensive homes being repossessed by the bank, we need to talk about Birdman, who's ranked as the 15th richest rapper in the world with a net worth of $110 million. But this is what makes Birdman's story unique. If he was worth over $100 million, why was his Miami mansion being repossessed by the bank for non-payment? Birdman had purchased the home back in 2012 for $14.5 million, yet by 2017 a foreclosure suit had been filed by the bank, and quote, all personal items within the home, including platinum records gracing the walls, a pool table and dozens of pairs of shoes, were all confiscated and placed in storage. The mansion was eventually sold by the bank for $10.85 million in July 2020. However, Birdman's lawyer has come out to explain the foreclosure, stating that it was the result of illegal loan terms set by the bank, so perhaps take Birdman's bankruptcy with a grain of salt. However, there's no ambiguity around how T-Pain went broke, as he's now come on multiple podcasts to explain just how brutal his bankruptcy was. T-Pain had built up a net worth of over $40 million at his peak in 2007, with all of his closest rap friends advising him that as long as he kept rapping, the money would keep on coming in.
Everybody before me that I had to look up to, they were just like, no, this is great. Once you start rapping, it's just money all the time. Nothing bad's ever going to happen. Your family's not going to come after you. Just rap, and it's just girls and swimming pools after this.
For this reason, his spending began to get out of control.
I bought my Bugatti.
You bought it for $2.1 million.
$2.1 million.
And then you, very shortly thereafter, you sold it for, all they gave you was $800,000.
Yeah.
So it was like renting a car for $1.3 million.
Yeah.
With the purchase of his Bugatti accompanying a $400,000 chain and houses for his workmates.
I got this house owning it. I got this other house for my assistants and, you know, all my runners and my producers and stuff. So we bought a house after that, and we just started going crazy with the money. I wasn't paying attention to it.
Which was extra bad, as T-Pain never even checked in on how much money he had.
I didn't want to know because I was led to believe that it's only gonna grow. Because these rappers told me that I'm just gonna make money forever. It's just gonna keep going up and up.
In the process, T-Pain began to create less music, and within a few years, his accountant was advising him that he was almost out of money.
My accountant was like, dude, you're like out of money. And I was like, no, I'm not.
And while T-Pain seemed confident that he had plenty of cash left, reality set in for him after he'd have to borrow money just to buy food.
When you say you was broke, you had like $0, bro?
I had to borrow money to get my kids burger.
What's the most you ever had in the bank at one time?
40 million.
However, T-Pain was lucky to get away with a loss of only 40 million, as the final person on our list makes this number look like loose change, 50 Cent.
50 Cent.
Released the 10th best-selling American hip-hop album of all time.
Yeah.
investment, plus a further $78 million from a luxury underwear deal. In the late 2000s, 50 Cent made an estimated $300 million in only 2 years. So when he'd announced that he was filing for bankruptcy in mid-2015, with debts totaling over $32 million, the entire world was thinking the same thing. How did this happen? Well, after 50 Cent uploaded a sex tape with Rick Ross's girlfriend, 50 was successfully sued for $7 million, which accompanied another court order for 50 Cent to pay $17 million to a headphone manufacturer after one of their collabs went sour. 50 Cent's clothing company G-Unit Clothing then fell out of the spotlight, which accompanied the closing of his movie company G-Unit Productions, as well as his boxing company SMS Promotions. Throughout the whole process, the global financial crisis had taken a toll on the value of 50 Cent's investments, and by 2015 he was earning a comparatively small $185,000 per month. You could certainly argue that this was enough for 50 to get back on his feet. However, $108,000 of this monthly income was going toward an 18-bedroom mega mansion.
Oh my God.
$77,000 was going toward menial expenses such as his gardener, with bankruptcy documents revealing that 50 Cent still owed money to his stylist, fitness coach, and even his barber. Despite this, he began to troll on social media with posts such as this one, spelling out the word broke with $100 bills, and within 2 years, 50 Cent had paid back $23 million worth of his $32 million debt. 50 Cent
that's
eventually got
perfect.
back to zero, and according to Google, has built up a net worth of $40 million over the last 5 years.
At Doctors Without Borders,
What's it called?
In the UK during the 2000s, there was no
Well, the death of the most hated subculture. Huh.
much anger as the word chav. No one
Chavs?
wanted to know one, no one wanted to be called one, and no one wanted to be one.
The hell's a chav?
They were everywhere. Not too fast, like that's fucking too fast, dickhead. Clothing brands that you didn't like were called chav. Rough neighborhoods were considered chav infested. But what exactly is a chav? And most importantly, where did they all go? Jay, it's not a fucking good day, is it? The year was 2004. The prestigious Oxford Dictionary had just started its new feature called the Word of the Year. Now, this was a way of snapshotting the British public's conversation of the year. To give you an example, in 2013, the word was selfie, you had toxic in 2018, and in 2014, you had vape. So you kind of get the gist. However, in 2004, this was the first year they'd ever done this list. And so what would be the most trendy word of that year? Well, it was chav. The word itself is said to have had its origins in the Romani word chavi, or chavi. This was a word used to describe the youth. However, there has been many disputes over who is the originator of the word chav. Some claimed it came from a popular expression from a town called Chatham, where the phrase Chatham's average was abbreviated to mean chav. However, the most widely believed origin of the word was an acronym: Council, Housed and Violent. But look, before we get into how chavs behave, let's get into how they look. Each chav would be equipped with its own sports caps, maybe a stripy polo t-shirt, or a full sports tracksuit. They would have very bold jewellery, necklaces, and even piercings. Of course, a few tasteful tattoos. For haircut, you had two options. Either you shaved it really low as a buzz cut, or you took half a job of hair gel, slapped it in your hair, and just spiked that baby up. If you wanted to go that extra mile, you could get some slits cut into your hair, or even a big Nike tick in the back of your head. And of course, no chav was complete without great footwear, which was typically something like a Nike Air Max. But then we had the ladies. Every female chav came with big hoop earrings. They would tie their hair back as tight as humanly possible, cover it in hairspray so not a single hair was
I'll get what's bad about them. Yeah, I guess I'll find.
Also wear thick makeup, bringing them to a slight orange hue. Big, colourful eyeshadow. Yeah, obviously tons of jewellery. And then usually they would wear some sort of bright pink, maybe white or baby blue tracksuit. But you might have noticed one commonality between the two, which was a staple of all chavs. And that was Burberry. Burberry was established in 1856. It was a high-end British clothing manufacturer. But you see, things would start to change in the 1990s with the introduction of the logo weight. Now, suddenly, big, loud branding and logos were becoming fashionable among amongst the working class. And what were considered more working class people were starting to get their hands on these big luxury brands like Burberry. And they were somewhat considered like a status symbol in a community. And interestingly for Burberry, they started to lean into this new demographic. So much so that in the year 2000s, Burberry decked out Kate Moss in full Burberry for her wedding.
He gave me a diamond necklace which he had hidden down the crack of his ass.
However, things started to get a little out of hand pretty quickly. Just quickly, I've got a really important channel announcement to make. I've officially become a lord. As you can see, my real name, Lord Kieran. I will also... Think about it, we tend to ascribe characteristics and traits to subcultures. If you think of emos, you're thinking of probably a moody, depressed teenager. Contrast that to the hippies who were chilled out and open-minded. Chavs were, well, how do I put this? Let me read what the Urban Dictionary has to say for them. Chavs, a British stereotype. Male chavs wear fake Burberry bought from sketchy market stalls. Trainers, fake gold jewelry. They're seen with cigarettes, drugs, and cheap alcohol. For example, Strongbow or Tesco's Value Lager. Chavs live in council houses and will steal your bike. Make sure you don't make eye contact or they'll yell at you in your face, but you won't understand what they're saying.
Well, one pics on Facebook thinking you're bad, mate. I might have lost one of your birds from home one by one. Fucking bear that must.
You see, a typical stereotype of a chav was that they were loud-mouthed and aggressive. And there was one typical location that a person might bump into.
Okay, now I see why they're annoying.
The shops. You see, honestly, in the 2000s, you couldn't walk down the shops to get a loaf of bread without bumping into a chav. They would harass you for a couple of minutes, try and take your phone, your wallet, or if they really took a strong disliking to you, you might receive what was known as a happy slap. I kid you not, happy slapping became like a national emergency. You see, it was around the same time as kids were starting to get a hold of camera phones. And so these young hoodlums would run up to a stranger, slap them, film it, and post it on the internet.
Christ, that is annoying.
The thing that made it so egregious was that there was no real reason for it. Like, if someone robbed you, you would feel annoyed, but you would understand why they're doing it, because at least they're getting a phone and a wallet off of you. But happy slapping just made no sense. It was literally just cruel. And so this
Oh my god, poor guy.
Social behavior. This term was like the boogeyman in the 2000s. So much so there was even the introduction of a thing dubbed as the ASBO, the Antisocial Behavior Order. The ASBO became not only a chavs themselves. You see, the ASBO, which was started in 1999, was created to clamp down on this antisocial behaviour. But the highest of all ASBO honours, if you were such a problem child, would be that the government would literally strap an electronic tag around your ankle, which you could not remove. And if you tried to, the police would be at your door in like 5 minutes. The ASBO would put restrictions on your life. You might have like a radius of how far you could go, and if you went past it, I don't know, it was like hitting an edge of a map in a video game. Or it might mean that you can't leave the house after 10 o'clock at night. But nonetheless, these were kind of a badge of honour for the chaviest of all chavs. So as you can see, a war had started to grow between the general British public and chavs. Newspapers would continuously lament the word chav into everyday conversation. Like growing up personally in the UK, the word chav was just used.
They look like, they do look like, they look annoying.
You would call them a chav, and that was a pretty bad insult. Like I kid you not, everywhere you looked in British comedy in the 2000s, you would find heavy references to chavs. You had Vicky Pollard in Little Britain.
You bat.
You had the Ali G show and all the films that surrounded it. The character Lee Nelson, and even the internet legend called MC Devo. Do you think he's dead?
I was down to talk to my doctor about Rudolphus.
Ask your healthcare provider about Rudolphus today.
As well, there were like serious TV shows, such as Benefit Street and Benefits Britain. These kind of showed like the middle classes of England what it was like to be a chap. These characters would also pop up in the world of real celebrities. You had Jordan, aka Katie Price, Jade Goody, N-Dubs. Comment below if you want a full video on N-Dubs. And the tabloids would follow and criticise these chappy celebrities for the way they dressed, the way they spoke, the way they behaved, the way they breathed. You know, I think over time and like with reflection, British attitude towards chavs can definitely be viewed as a little bit snobby. It got to a point where the Prime Minister, David Cameron, had to do a speech in defence of chavs.
Hoodies are often more defensive rather than offensive. They're a way to stay invisible in the street. The best thing can sometimes be to keep your head down, to blend in, don't stand out.
This speech was later referred to as hug a hoodie because he makes reference to the word hoodie, which became another word that was used to describe chavs. It was truly a war in the public sphere. The author and journalist Owen Jones, who I have to admit I don't really agree with him on a lot, he wrote an entire book called Chavs, The Demonisation of the Working Class. The description of the book reads as follows. In modern Britain, the working class has become an object of fear and ridicule. From Little Britain's Vicky Pollard to the demonisation of Jade Goody, media and politicians alike dismiss as feckless, criminalise and ignorant advance. Underprivileged swath of society whose members have become stereotyped by one hate-filled word, chavs. So what was really going on here? Were this generation of so-called chavs becoming increasingly degenerate, more violent and criminal, or were they being unfairly ridiculed by the judgmental middle class and upper class? But then somewhere around the mid-2000s, something interesting started to happen. In 2004, a film called Bullet Boy was released. In 2006, a film called Kidulthood was released. This led to a series, Adulthood in 2008 and Brotherhood in 2016. There was this definite rise in films that showed a different perspective on chavs. One that showed it more from the inside and not the outside as we had been looking at it before. But something's not quite right, because the word chav doesn't really fit in here to describe what we're seeing. Chav was usually used to describe a working class person with a specific taste in fashion and aggressive attitude and were predominantly white. But into the 90s, the 2000s and the 2010s, the ethnic demographic of London was changing. And London has and always will be the cultural capital of the UK. Trends start in London and spread out to the rest of the UK. And so as London was changing demographically, so too was the culture, which started to influence the working class and I suppose you could say chav culture at large. I'll give you an example.
Oh my
If you
God.
look at this clip here from Adulthood. It's pretty hard to say that this is the same as this clip of MC Devo, at least aesthetically.
Like little kids don't mind me or like that. They call me like Uncle fucking Devo and that.
What's he saying?
And out sweets and a bit of booze and they fucking love that.
They're not exactly wearing the loud, colourful designs.
I can't understand you, and I'm 52% English.
Was changing. Toward the end of the 2000s and into the early 2010s, the word chav itself was kind of in a limbo. This once trendy word used to insult everything was now kind of old-fashioned. And people started to notice as they walked down to their local Tesco's, there were a few Burberry-clad chavs that were throwing sweets at you and yelling mean things. And look, it's not only me that noticed this. If you type in, where did chavs go into Google, there are plenty of other people that noticed it as well. Now, you see, it's at this point where I wish there were minds greater than mine that could explain this social phenomenon. Owen Jones was actually asked in an interview, bid for the right-wing Conservative Party to appeal to the working class. They stopped using the word chav to degrade them and rather tried to turn the working class against the uppity middle class, who tended to look down on them on their views on things like Brexit. And it's an interesting theory, but I don't think the media is the be-all and end-all of the word chav. I don't think it ever was. This was a word that originated organically within culture. And that specific change I explained in politics only happened around 2016. The word chav was changing before then. I can tell you my theory. Wait for it. Stormzy. Okay, look, it wasn't just Stormzy, but just hear me out. I personally feel like Stormzy and the second wave of grime music in the UK was a massive influence on the rebrand of what was originally called chavs. Around the sort of mid-2010s, Stormzy and Skepta, as well as specifically the song German Whip by Meridian Dan, it started to be very successful in the charts. For the first time in a very long time, grime music and UK rap was starting to be popular again, and this new wave of UK rap brought with it an aesthetic. When you saw Stormzy and Skepta, they didn't dress tacky, but instead they kind of looked stylish. I think one really pivotal moment was the lyric that Skepta said in the song That's Not Me, where he states, and I shall read, yes, I used to wear Gucci, but I put it all in the bin, because that's not me. I mean, this was just a lyric in a song, but I do think it was kind of a powerful thing to say, because what Skepta did was show that he was proud of who he was, and where he was from, and he didn't feel that he needed to wear the designer clothing to fit into society, but instead he could just be himself and be respected for it. And very quickly, Skepta himself became a fashion icon, popularising what some would call the roadman. The roadman aesthetic changed fashion globally. Nowadays, you can see someone like Rishi Sunak wearing a hoodie. If he did that in the 2000s, he would be fired. And sportswear brands are no longer seen as only worn by like the poorer working class, but instead is stylish and worn by celebrities globally. Like, I kid you not, there has been runway models dressed as roadmen. The rise of UK rap and drill has changed what working class youth culture looks like, but not only that, also what it thinks of itself. Because there is like a notable attitude change between roadmen and chavs. Your chav was typically seen as lazy, aggressive, and tacky. However,
Let's see if I can find it. Oh my god. Just look at that pic. Just, it's gone. Are bridges tornado death traps? Yes, they are.
Do all the naysayers have guests?
That's rightly yours.
Most of us have experienced the dread of driving through a severe thunderstorm late at night. Flashes of lightning all around, squinting your eyes to try to see through your windshield wipers, the constant sound of raindrops slamming into your windshield. But then up ahead, you see an overpass. You pass through it, and for that split second, all the sounds and chaos cease. Everything was so peaceful, even if it was just for 1 second. This is the allure of the overpass. What appears to be a safe haven is, in reality, a tornado death trap. For decades, motorists have crowded underneath bridges and overpasses to ride out storms. Sometimes it's just to avoid hail, but this is an absolutely terrible idea, especially in the event of a tornado. So many people still to this day believe that these are safe places.
No.
Some even leave their houses to find one when their local tornado sirens start to go.
No. Unless you're in a mobile home. Actually, never mind. If you're in a mobile home, you should find a shelter that's better, or you should at least probably get in a ditch or something. Cover up.
We're going to talk about what you should actually do if you find yourself being chased down by a tornado on a highway.
Actually, never mind. What is a good idea? What should you do if you are in a mobile home and there's no other shelter available?
As always, be sure to like and subscribe if you
Just
want
tuck it in, prepare.
content. Okay, so wait, before we begin, why are bridges and underpasses, or overpasses, so dangerous? There are a few reasons we're going to talk about, but let's talk about the most obvious one, the wind tunnel effect. Essentially, if wind is blocked by a structure, in this case a bridge, the compressed wind hitting the bridge will search for the path of least resistance, and then speed up during that process.
You have strong winds out in the open, but they can get even stronger beneath an overpass, and the reason why is it basically funnels in here and can create stronger winds.
Winds are simply more focused beneath bridges, so they go faster.
All the cars that had pulled in and parked under the overpass had been blown and were stacked up on one another.
So where did this dangerous misconception begin? Well, it was that instinctual safe haven feeling we discussed in the intro that led James Montgomery to seek shelter under one during the terrible Tuesday tornado outbreak of April 10th, 1979 in Wichita Falls, Texas. Montgomery was interviewed for a tornado safety documentary in the 80s. Here's the video.
Realizing that I could not outrun it, I started looking for some type of protection, either the culvert, or about that time I thought of the wedge shape up underneath the overpass as a possible source of protection. We ran to the paved area underneath the overpass and started running up toward the wedge, and by that time the wind was so strong that I just spread-eagled on the concrete to create the lowest profile. I immediately looked out from under the overpass and saw the National Guard Armory completely disintegrate.
This very specific instance and video may have been the beginning of the myth, but it wouldn't be until a famous video of a tornado in 1991 where the misconception would become mainstream. While driving down a Kansas turnpike on April 26, 1991, reporters Ted Lewis and Greg Jerry
Yeah, there was these two guys that were driving and they took cover under it.
captured an F2 form right in front of them. As news reporters do, they instantly began filming it. Unfortunately, they had found the tornado slowly heading towards them.
Listen to the wind. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Go, go, go. Shoot it. Better floor, shoot it. We're all right.
While they initially tried to outrun the tornado to no avail,
No. Yeah.
they decided to seek shelter under an overpass. They park their car and then they run up the ramp underneath the overpass with another family. The other family is Butch Gilbert and his 2 daughters. Someone in the video shouts for everyone to get up underneath the girders. Butch Gilbert and his 2 daughters run up and get close to the very top. They get up on the ledge and beneath the girders. The girders is a key point of the video. Meanwhile, the cameraman continues to film and puts his camera down over the ledge. The footage is incredible. Before the tornado crosses near the bridge, you can see it flip a vehicle off in the distance. The occupant of this vehicle did survive, but he did have some major injuries. Once the tornado veers past the bridge, the winds underneath the bridge become extremely intense for about 5 to 6 seconds.
Damn. Yeah, that would rip you. That'd suck you right out.
After the tornado
like a
passes,
vacuum cleaner
survivors
sucking down a
immediately
fly.
come to the aid of others who weren't so lucky.
Miraculously, the driver escaped with only minor injuries.
This specific overpass is Bridge 89267 near Cassaday, Kansas on I-35. If you visit the bridge on Google Street View, there isn't much to be seen. It may be one of the most famous ordinary bridges out there. It does indeed have a page on bridgehunter.com, so there are some enthusiasts who actually do care about this bridge. This video is so famous that I actually remember them bringing in the TV, the classic TV cart in 8th grade, into our classroom and showing us the video, because it was like a tornado safety video or something, and no one told us, 8th graders, this was like in the 2000s, no one said, hey, this is a terrible idea, don't do it. No, they just showed it to us and said like, oh, look at this footage, isn't that crazy? Very famous video, but if it's such a terrible idea, how did the news crew and the family walk away with no injuries? You see, the family and the 2 news crew members were actually extremely lucky. First off, this specific bridge
had like
has
the little
girders.
thing where you
Most
can tuck in.
overpasses don't actually have girders. They have just a blank wall. So, first of all, this is an exceptional overpass. Second of all, the tornado actually veered off to the left and didn't go over the bridge. It went right next to the bridge. And even though it didn't go over the bridge, there was still a ton of wind sweeping through underneath. So these guys were extremely lucky to begin with.
All around him, the critically injured await emergency care.
Since this video was released in 1991, 8 years later, by 1999, the overpass misconception was mainstream. A lot of people knew about this. A lot of people had seen this video on the news or someplace else. And that's what led Kathleen Walton and her 11-year-old son Levi to seek shelter underneath one during the infamous May 3rd, 1999 Bridge Creek Moore tornado. They abandoned their car near mile marker 107 on the H.E. Bailey Turnpike. As the tornado approached, Kathleen put her son up onto the small area between the road and the bridge. This saved her son's life. However, Kathleen would not be as lucky, as she was swept away by the tornado. In the last few moments of her life, she sacrificially put herself in danger to protect her son. The bottom of the overpass would be caked by mud that had been sprayed by the tornado. Levi would then go on to scrape his name in the mud. In 2004, 5 years after the tornado, an unknown person with the website Baptist Life would go and revisit the same bridge. In these photos from 2004, you can clearly see Kathleen Walton's name spray painted on the side of the bridge. This was the exact location where she was swept away from the tornado. The signature left by Levi would also still remain 5 years later, etched in the mud. There were a few memorials that had been placed for her as well. Furthermore, a piece of scrap metal from the tornado remained lodged in the side of the bridge. On Google Street View, the remnants can still be seen. Kathleen's spray-painted name still remains 20 years after the tornado. In 2019, a news crew went out to the overpass, and even Levi's etched name remains on the steel beams beneath the bridge. However, it does appear that the scrap metal has been removed. One very eerie photo shows the outlines of others who had taken shelter underneath the same bridge. When the tornado went by, it sprayed mud all over underneath the bridge. You can see the silhouettes of people who were crouched. This photo was taken 5 months after the May 3rd Moore tornado and has been given the name The Ghosts of Moore. Around the same time this tornado hit this bridge, Tammy Holmgren and her daughters would seek shelter beneath another overpass further to the northeast. They were able to dodge the tornado. But this photo, taken by J. Pat Carter of the Associated Press, would make its rounds throughout the media following the event. Many praised them for doing the right thing. This is the bridge where this photo was taken. You can see down on the street view the same mile marker, 107. final bridge I want to discuss is the Shields Boulevard I-35 interchange and more. At this location, there were 11 injuries and 1 fatality. In fact, during the KFOR footage of the event, the moment where Mike Morgan is found speechless happened around the exact same time the tornado crossed this overpass. This bridge saw a lot of horrific injuries. These horrific injuries include shattered bones, missing fingers, missing ears and noses. This tornado overall saw 3 deaths from people underneath overpasses. Now, to be clear, there's still debate to this day on whether or not a bridge is a terrible place to seek shelter. One study actually found that the wind tunnel effect was debatable. This is just one study. There's a lot of experts, including Reed Timmer. These people recommend not getting underneath overpasses during a tornado. Okay, so what should you actually do if a tornado is heading towards you and you're on the highway? Okay, first of all, relax and stay calm and see if you can see the tornado and see if you can make out the direction it's going. If you can see the direction it's going, then go perpendicular or away from that direction. So if the tornado's going like this, then you need to head like that. Just see where it's going. If you can't tell where it's going, then try to find a building to seek shelter in. If there's a building around, break the window. Who cares? Get in and find an internal room on the lowest floor. And if that is not an option, try to find a ditch.
A ditch, yeah. A deep trench.
A deep ditch. I know it sounds terrible because, there's hail hitting you and flash flooding can be an issue, so be careful of that. It's just a bad situation, so just be weather aware. Get like an app that warns you if you're in a tornado warning, so don't be in that circumstance. But if you are, find a deep ditch. Thanks again for watching. I love y'all. See you in the next one.
No. Just stop. Okay. Damn, I'm trying to find some. Alright, Mike, I'm gonna go see if I can find some cookies. Get back. I'm going to go search for cookies. You're back. Visit my guinea pig. Sorry, it took a while. Try to find a new video to load up.
Plugged in and get ready to game.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. So,
Hidden
we're gonna do something a little
lost,
bit new today.
discovering lost
So
tornadoes
I do
on
my free
Google
time
Earth.
often. We're gonna try to find some lost tornadoes. What I mean by that is, let me show you what I mean. If you go to Alabama, for instance, right here is Alabama, right? Classic. You can already see some lines, and I've shown this in my Alabama video. Check it out. You can go 2010. Boom. You see that? Boom. See those lines appear? Right in here? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go find some green areas, and we're going to see if we can do the same thing. We're going to see if we can discover some old lost tornadoes. Obviously, we know the traditional tornado alley right here. You have your Dixie Alley, it's kind of a new thing, but yeah, definitely lots of tornadoes there. Let's just choose Missouri. Missouri has some green areas, and I'm just doing this like random. Like I have no idea what I'm about to see, so we're just gonna see how this goes. Okay, look at this already. I'm not even kidding. Look at that. I did not just like go into that. That looks like a tornado track right there. That's what I'm talking about, guys. Oh, look at that. 2008, perfectly green. 2009, we got this patch right here. This is typical. Oh, look at this. Oops. Look at this line. Oh, we even got some jumping. But look at that. That's crazy. This is a tornado. It just 100% is. Now you see what I'm talking about. Anyways, we can go all the way back to 1985. 84 here. So here we are in 1984. Things are looking green, looking really good, and we're looking just for any signs of, lines. We're looking for lines here. Going through the years, scanning, still scanning.
Oh, sorry, my dogs are barking.
See this line? I think it's a road. It's a road. Going through, we're searching. Dang. 90s were a safe time. Yo, right there. Alice Nor. 2002. So look at this. Nothing right here. Nothing.
You're back. One hour. The city built on a toxic
Struggling to write.
dump.
What is your new Louise Lewin?
You and every other
Uh,
girl on the planet.
I want to try new foods.
Love Canal, environmental disaster. The city built on toxic waste. Many of us have started a project and not been able to finish it. For most, this is a mere annoyance. But for the residents of Love Canal, what began as a failed ambition turned into arguably the worst environmental tragedy in the U.S. In 1890, William T. Love was struck with a brilliant idea. He wanted to develop a thriving community in Niagara Falls, New York, but he needed to find a way to generate electricity in the area. Because of the proximity of funds, and all that was left of his ambition was a 60 feet wide by 3,000 feet long ditch. Despite the ditch not causing any problems, governments are not eager to let any good land just sit there. And so, in the 1920s, the area began to be used as a municipal and industrial dump site. The disposed materials were fairly innocuous, and the site continued to be used as a dumping ground for everyday trash up into the 1940s. But then, something much more sinister came into the picture. In the early 1940s, the Hooker Chemical Company purchased the Love Canal and used it as a dump site for chemical byproducts. Hooker Chemical maintained several factories that dealt with perfumes, dyes, and synthetic resins. Many of the resulting chemical byproducts were caustic and could potentially cause great harm if someone came into direct contact with them. However, factories had to keep up with demand, so Hooker kept pumping out more products, which produced more and more toxic waste. Finally, after about 10 years, 19,800 tons of toxic waste had been buried just 25 feet under the ground in the Love Canal. The site was filled with chemicals only contained by the walls of their steel drum prisons. When the dump site was established, the canal had been drained and lined with clay to protect against leakage. But, as we now know, those safety measures were far from adequate. In 1953, the Hooker Company decided they had no more use for the dumping ground, so they sealed it with more clay and sold it to the Niagara Falls School District for a price of $1. Perhaps, in retrospect, the low selling price should have been seen as a warning. Well, that and the fact that the Hooker Company made the school board sign an agreement that said it was potentially dangerous to build on the dump site and that they could not hold them accountable for any damage that might arise from the buried waste. It was
That's sus right there.
The school board built a school on the land and promptly sold the surrounding area to a housing project. Despite a warning from a leading architect who mentioned it would be poor policy to build in the area since it was unknown how much waste product was still present in the ground, the building of the city went forward. Right away, things started to go wrong.
Excuse me.
During construction, workers broke holes in the clay lining of the canal to run sewer lines for the town. The clay lining, as a reminder, was there to protect against any chemical leaks that might escape their
And now it's ruptured.
their way into the soil and water. And, as if the damage to the clay wasn't enough, some of the barrels themselves were damaged. While this did cause some issues during construction, such as strong chemical fumes and leakage, the city didn't seem concerned. The school building was simply relocated 85 feet north, and everyone treated it as a non-issue. The school opened its doors in 1955. By this point...
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Where can we build a school? Oh, a toxic waste dump that is, well, proven to be hazardous, maybe even carcinogenic. Yes, great place. Put it there. Now all the kids will, well, those kids will not have kids. Sounds like a good idea. Yes, approve. Who the hell signed that paper? That's a stupid... Yeah, you got that property for $1. Here's the thing. Cheap properties are very bad sign.
800 families had moved into the area and settled into houses adjacent to the canal. 400 children attended the school, and several other schools were built to accommodate the growing community. Love Canal was made up of hard-working middle-class families who were looking to settle down in what they thought would be a thriving community. But those dreams didn't last long. Eager to keep building, the school district sold off the remaining land and private developers built more homes. Later that year,
Well,
a
shoot.
25-foot area completely disintegrated, exposing several toxic chemical drums, which were filled with water during rainstorms. Puddles formed all around town, and
Hi, dropshippers.
Here's a bad thing about steel. You know what steel loves to do, what we don't like? Well, it's called rusting. Steel doesn't really like water or oxygen that much.
Face with tears of joy, beaming face with smiling eyes, rolling on the floor laughing.
You see, steel/iron and oxygen get along with each other like if you... What's it called? Oxygen and iron/steel's relationship, basically the interaction with each other is like putting a Democrat on like a far left person and a far right person in the same room and watching what happens. Because guess what? Nothing good happens. Steel loves to rust. It is notorious for rusting. Unless you line it with something like chromium, which is extremely corrosion resistant. They really should have gone the extra mile to put they should have sealed them in concrete.
basements, plants and flowers and gardens lining the streets began to rot and die. If there was visible water, it was contaminated with chemicals. You could even see steel drums poking out of the earth in some areas. The air smelled rotten, with a distinct chemical smell. The visuals were bad enough, but it was about to get worse. As the years passed, Love Canal residents began to experience health problems, and many children were born with health defects.
That's a big red flag.
At the time, the environmental and health consequences of waste chemicals were not well known. During the early 1970s, there were many cases of exposed drums and leaking chemicals in Love Canal. But the Niagara County Health Department simply ordered leaks to be covered with soil. Unsurprisingly, that action was not effective.
Yeah, that's how the government deals with their problems. Just brush it under the rug, cover it up, and the problem goes away. No, that is going to quite literally come back and haunt you. If you do this, you're only delaying the inevitable.
However, Love Canal was yet to be exposed to the world, as many other environmental disasters were just beginning to gain international traction. In 1976, an investigator hired by the city noted toxic chemical residues in the air and in the sump pumps of homes at the canal's southern end. However, the city's only response was to place window fans in homes with some of the highest chemical residue levels. It wasn't until the fall of 1976 that the...
Here's the thing. Those are going to mitigate it. The way you solve a problem is you find the source of it and exterminate it. For example, if there's if the chemicals, the best thing to do, although expensive, is to dig them up and move them somewhere, or to prohibit people from living on that land. Not just covered up. The inevitable will occur. It's just only a matter of when. And when you push that off further and further, the problem gets worse, and the rot continues.
Were even mentioned in any news publication, and health departments were slow to get any chemical testing done. However, once the initial testing was complete, people's fears were confirmed. Several chemicals found at the site, including benzene and chloroform.
Benzene is a notoriously carcinogenic chemical. If you don't know what that word means, carcinogenic, it means that chemical has the ability to cause cancer. Benzene is a very cancerous material to handle. It's basically glucose without oxygen. And on this video, it's a ring of carbon atoms. Three double bonds can be found. And they're all hooked up with hydrogens. Yeah, benzene exposure is not beautiful.
Severe conditions, including leukemia. In 1977,
Cancer.
Love Canal experienced heavy snowfall, which raised the water table level. a result, more contaminants mixed with the groundwater. And finally, the state departments of health and environmental conservation began studying the air, soil, and water. The following year, they began to run blood tests on residents. 97% of residents had traces of 1,2,4-trichlorobenzene in their blood. Benzene affects the cells in the human body, causing cancer and making it difficult for your body to mount any kind of immune defense. Traces of several other chemicals were also found in the samples. These chemicals, often used in agriculture, are carcinogenic and can cause liver and kidney problems, headaches, and blood disorders.
Trying to lose weight? NextMed offers new FDA-approved medication.
I don't need to lose weight.
And Wegovy.
In July of 1978, the health department announced that 81 different chemicals were polluting the homes in
Jesus, that's a lot of chemicals.
discovered that 200 tons of 2,4,5-trichlorophenol, which is used as a fungicide and pesticide, were buried. It is a compound related to dioxin, responsible for many diseases, including significant reproductive and developmental problems. A medical survey soon found that 7 out of 10 homes in Love Canal showed evidence of chemical leakage, and 75% of residents had increased health risks. Several of the residents had already fallen sick with serious illnesses, and an alarmingly high rate of babies in the community were born with birth defects. During this time, the miscarriage rate in Love Canal went up by 300%. The women who lived closest to the dump site were at the greatest risk of having miscarriages. If a pregnancy made it to term, the rates of crib deaths were also high. The children who lived had various health conditions, such as webbed feet, 3 rows of teeth, deafness, and damaged kidneys or lungs. It was also found that most children born in Love Canal had lower birth weights and more health and developmental issues than children born elsewhere. In August, the State Health Commissioner declared a state of emergency at Love Canal. An evacuation order was made for the families in the first 2 rings of houses near the canal. On August 7, President Jimmy Carter declared Love Canal to be in a national state of emergency. Shortly after, New York Governor Hugh L. Carey visited the community and announced the evacuation of the 239 families living closest to the canal. In October 1978, work began on a chemical drainage system, but residents were angry. Calls grew to evacuate the entire community. On December 11, picketers arrived at the work site demanding answers and safety. Their leader was a young mother in Love Canal resident named Lois Gibbs.
Stupid ass company, they ruin everything.
Briefly arrested before having all charges dropped. This began several years of activism for Love Canal residents. For many years, the government and the Hooker Chemical Company downplayed the severity of the situation, while residents grew increasingly desperate. Everyone but the families closest to the dump site had to continue living in homes filled with noxious substances. In February of 1979, the evacuation radius was increased to 6 blocks. Meanwhile, the other residents were still stuck with severe medical conditions in their homes. None of them could afford to move without financial support, as all of their homes had become worthless. In May of 1980, the Environmental Protection Agency produced a study that showed that Love Canal residents may have chromosome damage due to the chemicals. Although the study was eventually refuted, it renewed anger in residents. On May 19th, residents held 2 Environmental Protection Agency officials hostage in the Love Canal Homeowners Associate office and demanded the entire population of Love Canal be evacuated. Finally, President Carter declared a second state of federal emergency at Love Canal and ordered the evacuation of all 728 families in the 50-block radius of the canal. Eventually, President Carter signed a $20 million state federal aid package for Love Canal. The government agreed to purchase 550 homes, and all but 76 sold. Over the next few years, the government destroyed all 227 homes closest to the canal. In 1982, the concentration of dioxin in the canal was 100,000 times stronger than the level where it begins to be toxic in animals. Over the following years, cleanup efforts continued. An Occidental Chemical Corporation, the company that purchased the Hooker Company, eventually settled with the residents in 1984. They offered a $20 million lump sum payment along with a $1 million medical trust fund. Love Canal was a horrific eye-opener.
They've already paid in blood.
And the impact that improper use and dumping can have on humans and the surrounding environment. In a tiny silver lining, largely due to Love Canal, the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act of 1980 was signed into federal law. Known as the Superfund Act, it is run by the EPA to investigate and clean up sites that have been contaminated with hazardous substances. Today, there are 40,000 of those sites around the country. Love Canal was the first site to receive funding. The cleanup process took 21 years and cost $400 million. Today, Love Canal has a fenced 70-acre site that includes the original waste site with a 40-acre cap, a barrier drainage system, and a leachate collection and treatment system. In addition, there are more than 150 monitoring wells in the surrounding area that are inspected frequently. It was found that Occidental did not break any laws when disposing of their chemical waste. However, they were still held accountable due to the retroactive liability provision in the Superfund Act. In 1994, Occidental Chemical Corporation and Occidental Petroleum agreed to a $98 million settlement with New York State for cleanup costs. A year later, the EPA sued Occidental Petroleum. The company agreed to pay $129 million in restitution. Lois Gibbs, the leading Love Canal activist, went on to found a non-profit that supports local activists in environmental work. Several houses in the outer rings of Love Canal were deemed fit for habitation, and new homes were built in the area. Along with the remaining 76, the new residents continued with their lives. Today, many of them are suffering from inexplicable health problems. If you found this video interesting, now is the time to like and comment. Subscribe to see when my next documentary is up. Until then, you can take a look at this episode of Dark History.
Anyway, continue on the 101 worst games of all time.
Love Canal environmental disaster.
26%. Sticking with horrid 2003 fighting titles for the moment, as we turn our attention to Stake Fortune Fighters, a game that proved incredibly unfortunate for those unlucky enough to shell out money for the darn thing. Premise-wise, Stake Fortune Fighters has nothing to do with sirloin or rump or perhaps fillet cuts of beef, and is instead centered on a tournament in which elite combatants fight each other for money, fame, and respect. Where are my meat products? Players chose from one of several generic-looking characters, and then got to button mashing their way through a number of foes.
Oh god.
The first issue with Stake Fortune Fighters was the sheer size of the levels. Players found that they spent much of their time just wandering these poorly designed environments looking for someone to fight, though when they did find an opponent, things didn't get much better. The fights themselves required no strategy beyond just hitting buttons at random, and brought absolutely nothing new to the table in terms of gameplay mechanics. All of the usual suspects were there, i.e. combos, special moves, and power-ups, but none of it felt particularly competent. The game did come with a multiplayer mode, though this was hampered again by the level size, which meant the whole thing had to be split screen. Well, I say the whole thing had to be split screen. The developers could have just brought everything together when players got close to one another, but no, they opted to keep things split throughout, which was just the tip of Stake Fortune Fighters' dumb design iceberg. Number 55, HBO Boxing,
2000.
26%. If you saw the words HBO Boxing just now and thought to yourself, oh, exciting, I can finally see who'd win in a fist fight between Tony Soprano and Carrie Bradshaw, then you're about to be in for some severe disappointment. Alas, HBO Boxing was not a game that pitted fictional characters from popular HBO shows against one another, but was rather a sports title that featured the boxers whose licenses other developers hadn't already gotten their grubby mitts on by the year 2000. The first of many problems with HBO Boxing was the fact that it looked just horrible, even for a game released in 2000.
My god, that's so awful.
Despite being based on real human people, looked very generic and moved in a slow, unnatural, and somewhat unsettling way. It was almost as though whoever programmed them had never experienced movement for themselves and had to base the animations on third-party accounts of what it was like to throw a punch. Things didn't get much better when it came to the actual gameplay, which was, again, slow. This was thanks in large part to the control scheme, which required entirely too much thought on the part of the player for a sport that's supposed to be instinctive. Put it this way, you'd have probably gotten a lot more enjoyment out of a George Foreman grill than you would this utter mess. Ooh, look at all the fat draining off that burger. So much healthier. Number 54, Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, 26%.
Huh.
Some out there who believe that Johnny Depp's performance as Willy Wonka was the greatest ever insult to the good name of Roald Dahl, and Gene Wilder too for that matter, but the actor's unsettling appearance in the role was downright brilliant in comparison to the movie's video game tie-in. The game centres on the eponymous Charlie, and more or less follows the plot of the film. Players start out by chasing money so that Charlie can buy a Wonka bar and get his golden ticket, before heading to the chocolate factory itself and dealing with the problems left behind by the other children on the tour. Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, the video game, didn't exactly wow critics on any platform. Some praise for the voice acting, which was provided by the cast of the movie, save for Johnny Depp, who presumably took one look at the project and decided his reputation couldn't take the hit. Critics were also quite nice about the pleasantly designed environments and colourful art style, but that's really where the compliments ended. The controls were wonky, no pun intended, the camera was awkward, and the whole thing was full of bugs, which in a food preparation area is a serious health code violation. Number 53, R.I.P.D. The Game, 26%.
Something police department.
We're sticking with the movie theme for the time being as we take a look at R.I.P.D. The Game, a title that was, according to critics at least, slightly better than the film it was based on. A rare treat. R.I.P.D. The Game had the same basic premise as R.I.P.D. The Movie. Certain souls are recruited into the Rest in Peace department after they die, and are charged with capturing deados, i.e. those who have died but managed to escape judgment. Unlike most movie tie-in games, though, R.I.P.D. opted not to follow the plot of the film, or even tell a prequel or sequel tale, but instead went down the narrative-less cooperative...
I remember you.
Each of the 7 levels consisted of
You've watched my channel before.
Increasing difficulty, during which the player will be tasked with fighting off waves of deados, and that's it. Critics complained...
Basically Doom, but worse.
Regardless of whether you were fighting deados in the meth lab, subway, or public library, they were all boxy, beige, and uninspired.
If you're trying to point to your name, then you just absolutely nailed it.
And it wasn't even clear during the actual matches whether or not they were winning. They just had to keep blasting and hope for the best. That was, of course, if they could find a match in the first place, thanks to a combination of dodgy matchmaking and people just not wanting to play this game, full stop. Number 52, Kiss Pinball, 26%.
Kiss Pinball.
If we were to ask you what things you most associate with glam rockers Kiss, you'd probably say things like makeup, weirdest games ever, crazy, 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 crazy nights, and venereal disease. In fact, we imagine you'd have to list off a lot of things before you finally got to pinball. Clearly, though, someone down at Kiss HQ thought there would be some serious overlap in the people who love Kiss versus people who love pinball Venn diagram, which is presumably why Kiss Pinball ended up being a thing. The premise of Kiss Pinball was quite straightforward. In fact, it was pretty much identical to regular pinball, just with Kiss theming. Players launched a small metal ball into the playing area and then used the flippers at the bottom of the table to hit targets. The game boasted a whopping 2 tables, each of which came emblazoned with the faces of Gene Simmons.
It's just pinball. How much does this game even cost?
And Ace Frehley, and blasted generic-sounding guitar riffs that we aren't even convinced were by Kiss. Surely they could have easily got the license for the music here. On PC, the game scored a passable 61 out of 100, but on PlayStation, it took...
I'm very close.
Aside from the lack of table choice and pants music...
I want at least maybe like 250 by June 30th, 2023.
The game only cost $10, but if you were a Kiss fan, there were
well, guys, I'm enjoying the last 6 months of my childhood, technically.
Their actual music, just throwing that out there, you know. Number 51, Tenkai Night, Battle, 26%.
Oof, 26% and below. Let's go. Bad games.
14, then it's possible you've enjoyed an episode or two of Tenkai Nights. The show focused on 4 teens who discover a portal to another world and end up getting dragged into its civil war. Honestly, if I had a quid for every time that's happened to me. Tenkai Nights Brave Battle was a tie-in video game for the Nintendo 3DS and followed much the same premise as the show. Protagonists Gurren, Ceylan, Toxa, and...
Yeah, you know what's funny? I think the what's called where is Nintendo HQ? Oh, I don't know. Never mind.
Fall through an interdimensional portal, assume the roles of the legendary Tenkai Knights, because they're certainly qualified.
Well, thank you.
Fight to protect both planet Quarton and Earth from evil.
Even if you're not subbed, it's people like you that actually help.
The game could have been great, but what players got was
You know it doesn't help? That freaking trader up there that sells a sapling for the price of what? 2 AR-15s?
The levels all consisted of the same thing over and over again, i.e. kill robots, get rewards, move on to next stage. The controls were clunky, and the mechanics were poorly explained, leaving players to figure out what the hell they were supposed to be doing through trial and error. 10 Kai Knights? More like 1 out of 10 Kai Knights. Well, it got 26%, so more like 2.6 out of 10 Kai Knights. Yeah. Someone take over, please.
Number 50, Jenga.
I was just playing a Roblox Minecraft.
This is a Switch bike.
Wait a second. I think I've heard about that. I think I've played that same game. I'm just a jerk and I just go completely like troll. That's an unpopular game in Roblox, but it's somewhat kind of fun. Another popular one is called Foam FPS I play, and I like other people that have like 100 to 1,000 career tags. I just go in with my 15,000 career tag account, just completely wipe. Oh, my puppy! I love my puppy! She's not really a baby anymore, but who cares? She's little, and she's a puppy. Fight me. Come on. Do something about it. I'm just kidding. Jenga World Tour?
There are some tabletop games out there that benefited from
Well, thank you.
to our consoles. Take Monopoly, for example. No more stupid denominations of money to count, no more metal tokens with sharp corners that get stuck in your feet, and absolutely no more flipping the board when you're losing. Then there are some games, like Jenga, that should be left well alone. If you're unfamiliar with the tabletop version of
Jenga could not be replicated in a video game. Well, maybe it could, but definitely not in 2007.
Time, and then placing it back on top. The loser is the player who removes the block that topples the tower. It's simple and straightforward, and definitely does not need to be digitalized. Jenga World Tour had the same basic premise, only with some incredibly wonky physics and controls. Not only was Jenga World Tour several times the price of its tabletop counterpart, but it was also fundamentally broken. The Wiimote made it incredibly difficult to remove the blocks, so 9 times out of 10, players found that they'd end up grabbing the wrong piece and bringing the whole tower down. Sure, the game came with some interesting environments, but that still didn't make it worth the price, or make up for the fact that it didn't work properly. If you look up the word useless in the dictionary, you'll find a picture of Jenga World Tour. Number 49, World War II Combat, Iwo Jima.
World War II Combat?
War! What is it good for?
It doesn't change. I think I've heard about this game.
World War II Combat Iwo Jima was not the first game in the World
Well,
War
thank
II
you.
Combat series, having been preceded by World War II Combat Road to Berlin a few months prior, but it was, according to its review score at least, the better of the two. Sadly, we won't be seeing Road to Berlin on this list, as it wasn't reviewed by enough publications to hit our criteria. As the name might suggest, World War II Combat Iwo Jima was set during the Second World War, and for the most part, players undertook combat missions on the Japanese island of Iwo Jima. The game was, admittedly, a budget title, though it clearly had lofty ambitions and hoped to measure up to the likes of the Call of Duty series, which is probably part of the reason that it was judged so harshly.
It looked like COD, like Call of Duty ripoff. I'm not saying Call of Duty like as in like the French. I'm saying Call of Duty, like the very first Call of Duty. I think the first Call of Duty was a World War II game.
Spending a few extra pennies on Call of Duty 3, but it would have come at the expense of your sanity. Number 48, Survivor, the interactive game, 25.88%. The TV show Survivor has been running in the United States since the year 2000, and sees a bunch of contestants dumped in an isolated location and forced to fend for themselves. Each episode, someone will be eliminated, and ultimately, whoever ends up being the sole survivor gets bragging rights
never
and a
actually
cool
played,
$1
only
million.
watched my brothers
It
play.
probably isn't everyone's cup of tea.
As in like
but it's
you
enjoyable if
like
you like
gaming or something.
Alas, the same cannot be said of the show's 2001 video game tie-in. As was the case in the TV show, Survivor, the interactive game, tasked players with surviving using only what Bear Grylls-esque skills they happened to possess.
Just play Ark Survival Evolved.
Sure they had enough food and water.
Just play Ark Survival Evolved. It looks better, it functions better, it plays better, and it's just better in every single way. Just play Ark.
Also that they were nice and pally with other inhabitants, or face being voted off. Although Survivor the TV show had a lot going for it, none of its charm was retained by its video game tie-in. The game...
You know what'd be really cool? Okay, make a game, like make a video game, right? Where you sign up, right? And you go in, and like a match will probably last like less than an hour, and you have 1 week to survive, or so. And you like what's it called? You survive on an island, and like kind of like the premise is this, and whoever survives like gets points or something, or it's currency. I don't know. Or even better, you can make it like imagine like you can put teams that like try to build up defenses over like a span of like less than half an hour, and then at the end they can get to fight each other, and whoever wins gets points. That'd be cool. Or like money.
Tedious, dull, and repetitive, though many players didn't get to experience much of it, as Survivor would repeatedly crash. The game was
My
so
brother is
bad,
forcing me to play Dogwood. I don't wanna. Typing.
I don't like the Hood. I don't really like that Roblox game. Just play Cat. Play some Cat.
Raven's Cry, 25.71%. You know what we love here?
Cat's like a traditional, like, if you love murder mystery and love being a murderer, and you kind of like being a sheriff, and you wish you could kill anyone and not get penalized, well, Cat is the great game for you. It needs knife ability to... Yeah, Cat. If you love murder mystery, it is the 100% the game for you. I love Cat. I have a shotgun revolver in that game. Quack, 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 quack. Quack, 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 quack. I just love trolling in that game.
Good name of our favourite rum-drinking scallywags by being offensive to just about every minority group they can think of. Yes, I'm talking to you, Raven's Cry. Stop hiding behind that big hat. The plot of the game focuses on Christopher Raven, a man whose family was massacred by pirates when he was a boy, and who now seeks vengeance against the men responsible. Raven's Cry was absolutely awful from start to finish, and it's actually a miracle that it managed to scrape as high of a review score as it did. Large swathes of the dialogue were missing, and the game was brimming with technical issues, which led critics to believe that it was released unfinished. Even when Raven's Cry worked, things didn't get much better for players. The gameplay was dull, the controls were clunky, the plot was somehow both derivative and yet convoluted at the same time, and the voice acting was just atrocious. As though that weren't bad enough, the game's writing was racist, sexist, and homophobic, which leads us to suspect that Raven's Cry was not, in fact, a video game, but a social experiment to see just how many people you could piss off in the space of a few short hours. Number 46,
I don't wanna
Wiffle
go,
Ball,
but I gotta play Dogwood.
25.64%. We come now to another game
Okay.
that was more useless and less fun than its real-world counterpart. For our non-American viewers, wiffle ball is a variation of baseball,
If you stream
which is designed to be
tomorrow,
played
I'll
in a
be
more
there.
confined space,
Okay,
like
that's
a
fine.
gymnasium or a garden. It's
Probably
played
playing
with
farming
much
sim.
bat and ball, and
I
from what we
promise.
can gather, is
You don't
favored
promise me
version.
anything. It's fine.
Wiffle ball for the Nintendo DS
You have a
had
life,
this
and I have
concept
mine.
and made it worse.
You're not legally obligated. You're not
Just in a way.
obligated to watch
Now,
my
we
stream.
won't pretend to be experts on wiffle ball, but according
Oh
to
god, I'm
several
glad I did not build
reviewers,
off
the whole
that. It
issue
would
with
have been
wiffle ball
hell.
video game was that the rules made no sense. There was also no way to adjust the batter's swing.
So, dude, I remember when I was playing wiffle ball and I got hit straight in the freaking nuts. Thanks. God, I got hit in the freaking nuts one time with a kitten ball. I got hit in the nuts another time with a puck going at least 80 miles an hour.
Was released in 2008. It reviewed horribly, but sold well, and so a cavalcade of sequels followed. Wii owners were spared the pain of Deca Sports Freedom, though, as the game was released as an Xbox 360 exclusive. Using the Kinect, players could take part in 10 different sports, including tennis, boxing.
I never played Xbox Kinect games.
Absolutely no prizes for guessing that each of these minigames controlled horribly. Sadly, the fact you had to control Deca Sports Freedom using the Kinect was its main draw, and since that didn't work properly, there was really nothing that critics could find to love about the game. It ended up getting compared unfavourably to Kinect Sports, a game that, whilst not perfect, at least did what it was supposed to do, most of the time. Deca
Just go
Sports
play
Freedom,
Resort
on the other hand,
Sports.
was a broken mess of a game without a single original idea. Number 44, Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie.
Ooh,
25.14.
we're almost down to 25%.
Bad movie tie-in land now, as we look at Peter Jackson's King Kong, the original game of the movie. A game that actually wasn't terrible on most platforms. The PS2, Xbox, Xbox 360 and GameCube versions of the game all managed to attain review scores in the low 80s. So where did it all go wrong for the Nintendo DS? Regardless of whether you were playing one of the good versions or the
Back then, you didn't have no iPad, you just had a Nintendo DS. And that thing sucked.
either Jack Driscoll, regular-sized human man, or King Kong, very large, not human man, and did their darndest to fend off the many hostile beasties of Skull Island. On home consoles, King Kong was a competent action-adventure title, but on the DS, it was a steaming pile of monkey plops. The graphics were laughably poor, and whilst the Nintendo DS wasn't exactly famed for its cutting-edge audio-visual capabilities, what was on offer in King Kong was completely unforgivable. Critics also lambasted the gameplay, which was mind-numbingly dumb and repetitive,
Almost
and the
20 minutes left.
that was on offer. In a title where you play as King Kong, you'd expect to do a little bit of rampaging, and admittedly, many players probably did end up smashing things, though they would have been their own personal belongings as they tried to air their frustration at this game. Number 43, Aquaman Battle for Atlantis, 25.1%. I don't think it's unfair to say that Aquaman isn't exactly the most popular superhero of all time. With that said though, he has his fans, and certainly didn't deserve the treatment he was given by 2003's Aquaman Battle for Atlantis, a game that was about as much fun as getting water stuck in your ears. In terms of premise, Aquaman Battle for Atlantis revolves around the eponymous water-dwelling hero's attempts to prevent his mortal enemy Black Manta from destroying the city of Atlantis. The first major problem with Battle for Atlantis was the fact that the whole game was a load of back-to-back water levels, and as we all know, water levels are the devil's work. Even if you're a fan of water levels, you probably wouldn't have enjoyed this game, as each stage was a bland, fog-filled snooze fest, with nothing more to do than just beat up a handful of copy-paste enemies. For a game set in the deep ocean, it was horrendously shallow. The graphics were nothing to write home about either, and the usually ruggedly handsome Aquaman ended up looking more like Dog the Bounty Hunter. Admittedly, Aquaman Battle for Atlantis was a budget title, so no one was expecting much in the first place, but even so, the whole thing was an affront to the DC universe, and players would have been better spending their $20 on literally anything else. Perhaps a Dog the Bounty Hunter box set. Number 42, Game Party.
25%. Here's where we start getting into the bad ones.
Go back to entry number 93 on this list, you'll remember us talking about just how terrible Game Party 2 was. stars. Alas, that wasn't even close to being the low point in the series, as proved by 2007's Game Party, and another entry on this list that is yet to come. Although the original Game Party wasn't the worst Game Party title from a critical standpoint, it could be argued that it was the most egregious offender for having the audacity to kick off such a repugnant franchise. The title was made up of a bunch of mini-games, all of which were controlled by wiggling the Wiimote in the general direction of the screen. Said games included darts, table hockey, and a trivia quiz, though as you can probably imagine, they were all just awful. Critics found the motion controls were poorly implemented for most of the mini-games, making activities that would be fun at your local arcade utterly frustrating. The one game that didn't require much in the way of controlling, the trivia quiz, was also disappointing as the questions weren't localised, so most British players found themselves stumped by questions about American football. However, Game Party's biggest sin was that it was simply no fun to play, even if you could get the controls to work. And we imagine that if you were to take it to a party, they'd ask you to leave immediately. Number 41, Amy, 25%.
Amy.
We've seen some incredibly poor horror games here at Team Triple Jump. Heck, we even covered a couple on this list, but few hold a candle to the sheer abhorrence that was 2012's Amy. The game's story focuses on Lana, who the player controls, and Amy, a child with autism and superpowers, as the duo attempts to flee a city that's overrun with zombies. As sidekicks go, Amy is pretty useless, but her one saving grace is the fact that she's able to heal Lana when her blood to lurgy ratio starts to tip in favour of the lurg. This is great and all, but it does mean that players can never venture too far from Amy, so just stuffing her in a cupboard while you do something else is completely out of the question. The irritating escort mission nature of this game certainly was a problem, but in comparison to Amy's other issues, it really was just the tip of the iceberg. You name it, Amy did it wrong. Its graphics were low quality and glitchy, the camera was awkward, the stealth mechanics didn't work properly, the gameplay was repetitive, and the voice acting was just awful.
This place stinks of that pesky infection.
If you consider titles like Resident Evil and Silent Hill to be the pinnacle of horror gaming, then Amy is the funny-smelling gunk straight from the bottom of the barrel.
Number 40, Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Battle 22.
Ultimate Battle
25%.
22.
We're not really sure what Dragon Ball Z did to deserve so
That belongs to Farming Simulator, bruh.
but this is the second appearance of the franchise on this list, so we can only assume it was something truly dire. The story of Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Battle 22's release is a bit of an odd one. The game was originally released in Japan and Europe in 1995 and 1996 respectively, but it didn't make its way to North America until 2003. However, by that point, the 6th generation was in full swing, and so when compared to PlayStation 2 releases, well, let's just say that Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Battle 22 didn't exactly fare very well. The game was a straightforward fighter starring characters from the Dragon Ball Z universe. Players would go one-on-one against either the computer or a friend, and the winner was the first one to deplete their opponent's health bar. Although some outlets praised the game's roster of fighters, which consisted of 27 playable characters, there weren't very many more positive things they could find to say. For reasons unknown, though presumably to speed up release, no English dub was produced for the game, and all of the cutscenes were removed, so the game had no story. The gameplay was also painfully slow when compared to other fighters of the time, the controls were clunky, and the visuals just weren't up to snuff. Number 39, eFootball 2022.
eFootball.
25%.
Ooh,
we come now to
this.
a game that is not only completely pants, but that also proves that the games industry has learned absolutely nothing from decades of flops releases. You'd think by now that developers would know what not to do, but it turns out that you would be wrong. Now, admittedly, eFootball 2022 is a title that's free to play, but there are some that would argue that even that price is far too high. Like the PES series before it, eFootball 2022 sees players taking control of little digital versions of their favourite footballers and passing, kicking balls in order to score goals.
This is just. This is just like FIFA? Am I right, FIFA?
To players who booted the game up to find that something had gone very, very wrong down at Konami HQ. The graphics were laughably bad, and images of a stunned-looking Messi and giant-mouthed Ronaldo soon made the rounds. Players probably could have gotten over the hilarity of the character models had eFootball 2022 functioned properly, but sadly for them, it did not. The game was sorely lacking in content, the controls were finicky, and you couldn't move for bugs and glitches. We'd love to relegate this one to the bargain bin, but considering that it's already free, the only thing Konami could possibly do to ship copies is to pay people to play it. They won't though. They're too busy with their darn pachinko machines. Number 38. Call for Heroes Pompolic Wars. 25%. If done well, the classic dungeon crawler can be a whole lot of fun. There's just something really satisfying about wandering up to a pack of enemies and mincing them like they're not even there. If the fundamentals aren't there, though, i.e. competent combat, level design, and controls, then you're going to be in for a rough old time. Clearly, the team behind Call for Heroes Pompolic Wars failed to invest in a copy of Dungeon Crawlers for Dummies, because they didn't even bother to include anything that might have made their 2007 title a half-decent game.
It's just a third person. It's not even a dungeon crawler. It's a third person, like slicer up.
From there, they went out into the world to match some creepy skeletons, though for what reason the game never really clarified. According to the back of the box, a rift has opened, and so players must fend off the evil Pompolic and the demonic forces that seek to enslave the human race. Oh, and there's something about Dark Souls, although we don't think this has anything to do with From Software. The game was a complete shambles from start to finish. The controls and combat were janky as
15 minutes.
confusing. The narrative was basically non-existent, and to top it all off, the game was riddled with bugs. Number 37, Cruisin', 25%. Oh, look everyone, it's a game that thinks that dropping letters from its name and replacing them with apostrophes makes it look cool. You don't look cool, Cruisin'. You look downright daft. The Cruisin' series has actually been around since the mid-90s, but not one of the games has been what you'd call good. In fact, of the first 4 titles in the franchise, only one has an average review score above 60%. Even by the series standards, though, the 2007 Wii exclusive Cruisin' was a very poor showing indeed. In terms of its premise, Cruisin' was much like other racing titles. Players competed in races in order to earn themselves some dollary dues, and those could be spent on purchasing upgrades for their car. However, as we all know, if you're going to do something simple and straightforward, you need to be able to do it well, and to call Cruisin' incompetent would be a massive understatement. Being a title for the Wii, players were forced to steer cars with the Wiimote, which was fine when it was functioning properly, but unfortunately the Wiimote was, at best, an unpredictable.
Oh boy.
The graphics also didn't look like they'd had
Bad
much of an update
controls.
since the original Cruisin' title came out in 1994, and the whole thing was marred by technical problems. Talk about a game that's cruising for a bruising. Am I right? Number 36, Lula 3D, 24.6%.
It's all like 2000.
The primary selling point is the fact that it comes with bouncing boobs technology.
Oh my god.
You're gonna be in for a terrible time. Now don't get us wrong. Complete second worst Batman vid. And dear viewer, we'll come back to it in a bit. Still, even though Batman Dark Tomorrow wasn't the worst of the Bat Bunch, it was still a very poor showing for old Brucey Dubs. Released in 2003 for Xbox and GameCube, Batman Dark Tomorrow sees the eponymous Caped Crusader facing up against Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, depending on how you want to pronounce it, who, in a bid to take over the world, is taking control of a weaponized satellite. Gameplay-wise, players got stealth-based action with a linear story, though there were multiple endings that could be obtained dependent on the player's actions. As we've said, though, the game was total crap, and we'd be hugely surprised if anyone has played it through enough times to see all of the endings. The actual premise of the game wasn't half bad, and even critics went as far as to praise Batman Dark Tomorrow's storyline and cutscenes. Sadly, they were about the only half-decent thing that the game had to offer, and as such it received a critical batarang-ing. Critics complained of wonky controls, dull and repetitive missions, and a frustrating camera, not to mention the veritable smorgasbord of bugs and glitches that plagued the title. Number 34, Hooters Road Trip, 24%. They say that the sexy stuff sells, which is probably why the Hooters chain of restaurants is so successful. Well, that and the fact that their chicken wings are absolutely banging, so we're told. Sadly, it seems that not everything attached to the Hooters brand is fun, as evidenced by 2002's Hooters Road Trip, a racing title that was lacking in both the racing and Hooters departments. The game gave players the opportunity, if you call it that, to race all around the United States, and as they did so, they got to unlock additional cars. If you're thinking that and or delicious meaty treats, then you're totally correct. The actual racing segment of the game had absolutely nothing to do with Hooters. That requirement was fulfilled with cringeworthy FMV segments sprinkled in between each stage. So what did Hooters Road Trip do well?
Nothing.
Was quite cool, I suppose. No, who am I kidding? The game was a
It's
complete
called
waste
So
of
Hot Girl
time.
Equals Good Content now?
The controls
Question mark?
were lacking in the graphics were, if you'll pardon my French, absolutely rubbish. The game was part of
10 minutes of this year are left.
With that said, you could have taken that $10 to an actual Hooters, ordered yourself some wings, and had a much better time in the process. Number 33, NBA Unrivaled, 24%. Yeah. Sports time, something about giving this everything I've got. You know the drill. Presumably, when Acronym Games came up with the moniker for their 2009 basketball title, they assumed that what the game would be unrivaled in was its gameplay, graphics, and how much fun it had to offer players. Well, it certainly was unrivaled in each and every one of those categories, though no points for guessing that it wasn't in a complimentary sense. NBA Unrivaled was basketball-themed and arcade-style, so players went 5-on-5 against either the computer or a friend to shoot as many hoops as possible. That is, convince a friend to play it with you.
Oof.
Problems with NBA Unrivaled ran deep to the point where it was basically unplayable. The animations were so poor that players often found it difficult to keep up with the action on screen, and the AI rubber banding couldn't have been more obvious if the developers had tried. Yes, NBA Unrivaled was a budget title, but there were so many better things you could have spent $10 on that wouldn't have left you feeling complete and utter disappointment, like a bumper pack of actual rubber bands. Then hold your things together, and you could have tons of fun pinging them at people. Still, at least NBA Unrivaled isn't the absolute worst sports video game ever made, so silver linings, I suppose.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Number 32. Terror Wars New York Invasion.
They're all like from 2000 to 2010.
You might do if hostile aliens invaded Earth. Personally, I'd probably just hide under my bed, and if the monsters came a-knocking, try to ply them with custard creams and hope for the best. I admit my alien invasion survival plan is probably not the best. However, if you're anything like the protagonist of Terror Wars New York Invasion, medical student John Armstrong, you'd be out there on the front lines with the National Guard giving those aliens what for. Why would a medical student be part of the National Guard? I hear you ask. Don't worry about that. I'm sure the game clears it up at some point. What's that? It doesn't. Oh, well, just go with it, I suppose. Unfortunately, Terror Wars' slightly flimsy premise wasn't its only problem. In fact, the first-person shooter missed the mark on pretty much all fronts. The first issue was that the game was insultingly easy, so because ammo and health were handed out like candy, players never really felt like they were in any sort of danger. It was also hugely repetitive, and not just in terms of its mission objectives, with textures and NPC character models copied and pasted all over the game. This might not have been so much of a problem if the graphics were up to snuff, but unsurprisingly, they were incredibly lackluster. Ultimately, Terror Wars New York Invasion had nothing to offer players. Technically, it was playable, but oddly enough, players look for far more in a video game than just functionality. Number 31. Postal 3, 24%. Have you ever wondered where the
24.
phrase going postal actually comes from? Well, we've taken a quick trip down that rabbit hole and found out the phrase is derived from a string of incidents in the USA where postal workers shot and killed multiple people. As though the fact that the Postal franchise is named after a series of mass shootings isn't bad enough, they don't even have the common decency to be good games, and just because Postal 3 is the only title to make it onto this list, it doesn't follow that the rest of them are good. In fact, until Postal Brain Damaged was released in 2022, the games had never garnered average review scores higher than 59 out of 100. Postal 3 is without a doubt the worst of the bunch, because not only was it an affront to good taste, but it was also a poorly made, buggy mess of a game. Postal 3 sees players taking on the role of the Postal Dude, who moves to the town of Catharsis after blowing up his old town with a nuclear bomb. Players may choose whether to take the good path, siding with law enforcement, or the bad path, joining in with the mayor's dastardly schemes. The game received a critical crucifixion, with reviewers complaining about everything from its poor writing to its technical flaws. Postal 3 was so bad, in fact, that even the developer regards it as a dodgy spin-off that should never have happened. They are not wrong. Number 30. Game Party Champions.
Another game party?
We promise you this is the last Game Party title that will appear on this list, and we thank you for sticking with us throughout them all. Not only was Game Party Champions the very worst of the Game Party bunch, but it was also released for one of the worst consoles that Nintendo have ever put their
Wii U.
into. Like its predecessors, Game Party Champions consisted of a number of mini-games based on sports and/or the sort of machines you'd find in an arcade. The title, boasting a whopping 8 mini-games, included mini-golf, air hockey, and baseball. Game Party Champions also took a stab at telling a story, though rather than pulling off a perfect assassination, it tripped on its shoelaces and pierced its own foot with the knife. Players take on the role of Riley, a young man who is berated for being lazy by his friend and coerced into entering a tournament at his local arcade. Oh, and they throw in a dead dad to give some explanation as to why Riley doesn't want to do anything. I'm not really sure why there was any need for that. The game was panned by every critic that had the misfortune to come into contact with it. And it was slated
6
for its
minutes.
ugly graphics, wonky controls, and
No
overall
kidding.
lack of fun. Ken Barnes of Nintendo Life even went as far as to say that Game Party Champions was, quote, so bad that your great-great-grandchildren will want to change their surname when they find out that you once played it. Ouch. Number 29, Legends of Wrestling 2, 24%. We understand that video games can be divisive at times. There may have even been an entry in this list so far that you actually secretly quite liked. Oh dear. But here's a statement I think I can make without being too controversial. Legends of Wrestling 2 for the Game Boy Advance was not very good. The original Legends of Wrestling, released on the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube, wasn't a fantastic title, but it did sell well enough to merit a sequel. In addition to the handheld release, Legends of Wrestling 2 was also available on the aforementioned consoles, and whilst those versions weren't good by any stretch of the imagination, they were a darn sight better than the GBA edition. Now, to its credit, Legends of Wrestling 2 for the Game Boy Advance did have the full 40-wrestler roster, try saying that 10 times fast, but aside from that, it didn't really have all that much to offer. In comparison to the home console versions, the graphics were painfully bad. The wrestler was horribly low-res, animation
Potato.
jerky,
It's potato.
difficult enough to tell what was going on when just two wrestlers were in the ring, and when more were added in, it was downright impossible. Throw into the mix some horrid collision detection, and you've got yourself a game that deserved to be suplexed straight into the nearest bin. Number 28, Pulse Racer, 24%. If the 2003
Almost
racing
1 a.m.
title
at my
Pulse
house.
Racer is to be believed,
Nice. There is 3 minutes and 30 seconds of 2022. 2022, I want to say out of 10, probably 8 out of 10, maybe 7.5 out of 10. It was a pretty good year. There were some problems, like Techno died and stuff, the Ukraine war. But wins, I got my very first few jobs. Actually, like for me, 2022 kind of sucked because I damaged my car, and I also damaged a golf cart and ran over in my neighbor's light posts. I had to pay all that off, but I had some wins because I got my first jobs, and I have ordered my first car. 2 minutes and almost 30 seconds. It's weird right now. Like, usually it just feels normal. Like, it's a new year. Like, this is a new time. 2023. Jesus. Thanks, world, for making me feel so old. One minute. 1 exact minute.
One minute.
Thanks for commenting that, because now I know that my thing has 15-second delay. $30 seconds. And 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and Happy New Year! It's finally 2023! Oh, yes! Woo! 2023 is finally here, folks! And 2022 is now officially the year of the past. Ladies and gentlemen, this is only the beginning of a new year. Woo! Happy New Year! Honestly. It's 2023 now. I mean, I love that. I love odd numbers. 23. And I will be graduating high school this year. I will be turning 18 this year, getting the car I ordered, and all that stuff. Oh man, thanks for such a great year, folks. Thank you so much. Man, it feels weird.
1 week until my birthday.
Nice.
Keegan is a little ball of fire. Hey guys, here's another short for you. I've been doing some research on some videos, and while doing that, I came across some interesting information, so when I come across stuff like that, I'll just make some shorts and show you guys what I found. For this one, I was Googling coordinates, and I was trying to find out, like, map locations and coordinates, and I was Googling Area 51, and it came up that the west coordinate is 115. We do go to Area 51 on Moon when we first spawn in. Most people already know that, and some of you may already know about this coordinate. I didn't, and I thought that was cool, but also, Area 51 has a huge backstory regarding Element 115, and that is a whole video on its own, but I'll briefly describe what I'm talking about. Some of you, again, may already know about this. Back in 1989, there was a guy named Bob Lazar, and he was like a whistleblower for Area 51 involving like UFOs and aliens. He claimed that there was an element called 115, and that the UFOs possessed by the government were powered by this element. Of course, at the time, the claims made by Lazar were tagged as absurd, as the scientific community had no knowledge of element 115. But in 2003, his statements gained more credibility when a group of Russian scientists managed to create the elusive element, and now, many years later, after that achievement, the discovery of element 115 was finally confirmed after numerous tests which verified its existence. However, the scientific version of element 115 drastically differs from what Lazar has described over the years, since according to reports, the element decays in less than a second and cannot be utilized for anything. But they're still testing to see what all they can do with it, and this element 115 was officially added to the periodic table in 2015 called Un Pentium. But I'll post more shorts when I come across cool information. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I will see you next video.
Interesting. I think I'm gonna go now. Happy New Year, guys. And to a nice, happy 2022.